Hello, this is One Mana Left, and today I'm going to do a long requested video on a guide to deep delve. Now, delve for the longest time was something that the people who were actually going really deep kept a lot of the information secret because it was very profitable and slightly competitive too. So, the few people out there that were making it really deep in delve would oftentimes do private profiles. They'd keep all their cards close to their chest. And since the delve rework in Scourge League, it's still kind of been that way, but the profit's gone at the bottom. But there's not really any content out there that is really targeted at deep delve. There's maybe a little bit of content on YouTube that is just generic delve information. But there are a few things that change as you get really far down. So this video, I'm going to talk about a few things. I'm going to talk about, one, the things that are actually different at deep delve versus shallow, because like I said, there's not a lot of content on there. That transitions into a discussion about the HP cap, which there's really no content anywhere that in-depth talks about the HP cap or any of the other caps in the game, the ailment cap. People loosely know about the dot cap, which is tied into this. But these caps in the game, they really become apparent in deep delve. But they also do affect the rest of the game, just in a lesser manner, because most of the rest of the game doesn't get to these absurd numbers like deep delve does. But if things keep going the way they're going, they'll begin to impact the game more and more. Although I'm guessing that will reset with PoE 2. But then I'm going to talk about how to do some of the hardest nodes in Delve, being the actual super difficult nodes and the 3 bosses in Delve. Ahuatolti, Kurgal, which we're on now, and all. And finally, I'm going to talk about where the money is in Delve, because I did make a pretty decent amount of money this league delving. I have a character that's probably all together, all things combined, worth like 15 mirrors. Maybe a third of that was from delve. I made a lot of money bossing and stuff and boss rushing, but there's certainly money to be made in delve. It's not the greatest money in the entire game, but if your build is an absolute monster, the delve money suddenly becomes fairly good. So let's get into the introduction here, because you'll see right now that I have a Kurgal in front of me, and we're at depth 5,356. And there's a modifier here that says 70% more monster life. Well, here's the interesting thing that I'm going to use this example to show off here. If I go to a spreadsheet here and go to depth 5,300, the monster HP is 600 times. The base HP on Kurgal is 62 million. So 62 million times 600 times would put him to 37 billion HP. Then I have this zone modifier that's 70% more life, which would put it up to 63 billion. I'm also here with 5 other players in a 6-person party, which is times 6 life. That would put the health of this Kurgal at 400 billion HP. Which, even when you factor in the damage reductions on Uber bosses, this would be 1,500 times more HP than an Uber Pinnacle boss. If there's a build out there that can kill an Uber Pinnacle boss in 2.5 seconds, if this monster had this much HP, it would take that build over an hour to kill this boss. And this boss has 2 different HP bars. You have to kill him once in phase 1, and then again he resurrects in phase 2, which would put his actual HP to double that. And now we're getting to close to 1 trillion. So that would mean even a build that kills an Uber Pinnacle boss in 1 second would take around an hour to kill this if this had that much HP. So I'm going to show this off. I'm going to do this boss. And the guys in this party are probably going to die, but they're all going to tag him to make sure this has 6 times HP. Alright, tag him. Alright, Now, I'm going to kill him. He's dead. So, you guys might think that, well, 6 people did the damage there. As you might see later on, I would say that the damage dealt there was 99.9% me. The Righteous Fire character was not doing the fullest damage. I'm gonna try to keep him alive though. I'm rooting for. All right, he's dead. That was not 6 people doing damage. That was mainly 1 person doing the damage there, as you'll see in these next burns, because he'll die at the exact same pace. Oh, I have no flares. That's really awkward. Ah, I did this. Okay, that's potentially bad. Alright, he's out. And like I said, he dies the exact same pace. Alright, so how fast did this guy die? About that fast. Alright. So get a good idea of how long that took. Okay. Offline. 4 dead and offline. So you saw roughly it was like 1 to 2 seconds to phase him. Maybe right at 2 seconds in the last phase. So if you think he has that, if you think that last phase, which is a resurrected HP bar of another 400 billion, I killed it in right under 2 seconds. That would mean I have 200 billion DPS. Well, I have a lot of DPS. It's into the billions, but it is not 200 billion. So I am going to show you now a different boss. It'll be the same boss, but there's a difference here. The boss I'm going to show you now is at depth 871. So there's a Kurgal here that is the same boss. Now, if I look at the graph here for the HP at 871, it is 29 times HP. So it's 62 million times 29, which is 1.8 billion. In Path of Exile, the maximum HP is 2.147 billion. You cannot have a bigger number in a 32-bit game than that, because that's the maximum signed integer. It's 1 lower than 2 to the 31st power, because there's positive and negative numbers, so the negative numbers take up half of your 2 to the 32nd. So let's look at the exact same boss again, with the difference in health multiplier is 600 versus 29. The other zone had a 1.7 times HP multiplier, and we were in a 6-person party. So that Kurgal I just did should have 200 times the HP of this Kurgal. Let's see if it looks any different. I'll give you a spoiler. It's actually not going to look much different. Remember how fast I was killing them before, right? A little bit of ramp, then like a 1 or 2 second phase. Oh, look. He died the exact same time. Like, if you played those two side by side, it is the exact same. Because that other boss doesn't actually have 200 times the HP of this boss. It has approximately the same. Once again, this one only has 1.8, so he's technically not HP capped. He's about, like, 85% of HP capped. So the other boss truly had about 20% more HP. But obviously, if the HP cap wasn't a thing, it would look night and day difference with 211 times difference in HP. But a 20% difference is minimal. It's going to look pretty similar side by side. Like, look at this. Same exact pace as the other kill. Like, about a 1 second burst. And then this phase is going to be about the same. Alright. If you played those two side by side, like I said, there's about a 20% HP difference when you factor in the fact that the HP cap is 2.147 billion, and that guy had like 1790, right? So it's a 20% HP difference, but that should be a blindingly obvious demonstration that there is a clear HP cap in the game, and this does start to influence things in Deep Delve. So I thought I'd use that as an intro. Let's get into some of the different talking points. This is going to be a long video. I don't necessarily expect people to watch the entire thing. It's probably going to be like an hour. I will try to have everything timestamped in the description. So if you have something that you really want to know about, you should be able to just go to the timestamp in the description. I'm not going to put like mid-reel ads or anything in this. Like, if you are struggling on an all and you just want to know how to beat all, I will have a timestamp in the description for all, and you can go and watch those mechanics. So whatever you want to watch specifically, you should be able to jump to the timestamp. But if you are really wanting to learn a lot about Delve, there should be something in this video for you to learn. If you know absolutely nothing about Delve, you might be better off watching like a few different intro videos. But I'll go over some of the generic stuff as well. But even if you're someone who knows virtually everything there is about Deep Delve, you might still learn some things in this video. Like Ben, for example, I watched him delve a little bit this league. I was in his chat. He was at depth 1800 in hardcore. Ben is one of the most knowledgeable overall PoE players, but he clearly had almost no understanding of what the HP cap was, or like what depth the HP cap started to appear at, stuff like that. Like, there's an example of someone who's like, you know, the best Path of Exile player that doesn't understand these things fully. So, unless you're like 2 or 3 people in the entire world, you will probably learn at least one thing from this video. And I'm looking at Rudy in chat right now, and he knows he's one of those 2 or 3 people. So I'm going to go over 4 main things. The first is the HP cap. The second is like the numerical requirements. I might totally do this out of order for what I'm saying right now, but the order I'm not saying now doesn't matter. The third is where the money is. People like money. And the fourth is the individual node guides, like how do you beat a Time Lost? How do you beat a Beyond? How do you beat a Kurgal? How do you beat a All? And like I said, I'll try to make it so you can timestamp to all of these. Okay. So let's talk HP cap, because that's what we're talking about right now. So I've already kind of gone over this, but in this game, there's an HP cap of 2.147 billion. This does influence the game outside of Delve as well. Some people who have no idea about the HP cap and don't really deep delve at all, they clearly know what the dot cap is. If you go and you talk about a build, if you play some crazy ignite build or poison build, you might see people talking and saying that they have dot cap. What is dot cap? The reason there's a dot cap in Path of Exile is because for whatever reason when the game was first coded, dots are coded as damage per minute. And since the biggest number in the game is 2.147 billion, and dots are coded as damage per minute, it's 2.147 billion divided by 60 seconds, which means a dot in Path of Exile cannot do more than 35.8 million DPS. Which makes dot builds very, very, very bad for Deep Delve. If you want to make it deep in Delve, you are probably not going to be playing a dot build. The only exception there's ever been to that was Oscar's Poison Spark, which was a very tanky build. It was before Archnemesis was added to Deep Delve and the rest of the game too. And it was a build that had about 70 mil DPS because it had like 35 mil hit DPS and 35 mil poison DPS. So it could kill a max HP monster in about 30 seconds. That was the like exception to the rule. But because there's a dot cap, you really don't want to have 60 seconds to kill something that is like the common HP that things have down there. But this HP cap does start to influence the rest of the game too, though. People always ask, why doesn't GGG just buff the bottom skills and keep the good skills the same? You know, why why nerf the top skills? Why not just keep the top skills the same and every patch buff the bottom skills to be the same as that? They will never talk about this answer because they never want to talk about the HP cap. But 100% the reason for that, you can throw aside any like ARPG philosophy. And like, you know, there is the common argument of they'd have to buff the bosses every league if they did that. But honestly, the single biggest thing that they will not talk about is because they're very aware that there's an HP cap. And if you just buff everything, you will eventually hit that HP cap in like a very short amount of time from power creep. You got to remember, this game has been around for like 11 or 12 years, and we've still power crept into some pretty absurd numbers with them having the nerf philosophy. But if they got rid of the nerf philosophy and just buffed everything every patch, it would take like 3 patches for everything to be doing like HP cap damage. It would not take long at all. If you think I'm insane in saying this, look at Diablo 3. Diablo 3 had the philosophy that they would never nerf anything. They would only buff the bottom skills, which is a very like, that's what the fans want, right? That's what the people ask for. Diablo 3 started off as a game where, like, Kriparian killing Diablo was doing, like, 50k DPS. By the end of it, if you fast forward, like, 8 years, they were not limited by the 32-bit cap. They were limited by the 64-bit cap. Diablo 3 is coded in 64-bit, which means their number cap is not 2.147 billion. It's 2 to the 63rd. That means their number cap is 9 quintillion. That is such an absurd number for a video game. And because they had this philosophy of never nerf, only buff, they got to a point where the Greater Rift bosses had to cap out at 150 because the bosses were at the 64-bit HP cap, 4 billion times higher than this game, and everything was at the HP cap already. So that's why in the final seasons of Diablo 3, the Greater Rifts capped at 150, and it went from being this content that you would take 15 minutes to beat to the rank 1 Greater Rifts on the leaderboard were like 1-minute rifts, and people just doing speed 150s. Like, look how that game numerically fell apart because of their number limit, because they had the philosophy of never nerf, only buff. Well, this game has a limit that is 4 billion times lower than Diablo 3. It is not 9 quintillion, it is only 2 to the 31st, which is only 2 billion. Same as RuneScape. That's max gold in RuneScape if that number looks familiar. So, okay. Because of that, though, they have this philosophy of nerf, don't buff. And through doing that, they've managed to stay under the HP cap for all these years. But even still, it's already influencing game design above ground. Like, Uber Pinnacle bosses have a modifier that says 70% damage reduction. If you go fight an Uber Exarch, it has a 70% damage reduction. Because normally they have 75 million health. So instead, they could have just made them have 250 million health because they have a 70 damage reduction. So that they could have just made them have 250 million health. Why didn't they? HP cap. Simple. Because Exarch can have modifiers on him. He can have 2 boss modifiers on him that make him have 2.2 times HP. And then you could go into a 6-player party, and he's now over HP cap by like 60% or 50%, whatever. It's also because of dot cap too, because by having the 70% damage reduction, the dot cap is an absolute. So technically, if you have a build that has like poison dot cap at 35 mil, if you're way over dot cap, you're still capped at 35 mil, even if the monster has a 70% damage reduction. So on stuff like Ubers that have 70% damage reduction, poison dot cap is actually like 120 mil if they would have just, increased the health. But like, that's a clear example of them making game design choices that are purely dictated because of the number cap. That is why those game design choices were made, and it's for a reason most people don't consider. We're entering the 12th and final hour of Path of Exile 1. I'm assuming in PoE 2, the numbers will get squished quite a bit. But this final 1 to 2 years of PoE 1 will probably naturally have the largest numbers of any previous year. So this HP cap is becoming more and more influential on the game. And in these final 2 years of PoE 1, it's going to be ever present. If you've played Trial of the Ancestors this league, if you're rank 2000 and you go into a party, especially, even solo probably, and you try to kill a Tota 2000 Titan Shell, how much HP do you think it has? I don't know. I didn't do Tota to 2K, but I'm going to go ahead and guess it's 2.147 billion. Just a hunch. So there's an example of they have a league mechanic this league. It's the current league mechanic, and there's HP cap monsters. So it's something that's only going to grow more prevalent and more influential in the final 2 years of PoE 1. So that brings us back to Delve, because as I just showed you in Delve, Delve is an environment that the HP cap is very, very much there. And so a really weird thing happens because of that. Let's go ahead and pull open the spreadsheet I made here for the monster damage and monster HP. So there's something interesting that happens because of this HP cap. When you start to go down in depth and you start to get to around 1,000, you're already at the point where the boss monsters have HP cap. So the bosses in Delve have considerably more HP than anything else. They have the full, like, Shaper HP, where they have, like, a 62 million base. I think Shaper base HP at 84 zone is 72 mil, and most of the Delve bosses in 83 zone are 62 mil. So they have, like, the standard boss HP, which is much, much, much more than a rare monster. When you get to about depth 1000, that is the full 2 billion, and their HP relative to everything else is substantially more. And you might be at depth 1000, and you might be able to beat all these nodes easily. You might be some, like, Bone Shatter Juggernaut that just blows through nodes easily. You have no problem getting through these things. You can fight a Smuggler's Stash, you can fight a Time Lost Cavern, you can even fight a Beyond node, maybe. Well, the boss there would have a lot of HP. But you are at a point where the trash monsters, the rares, the magics, they're not fighting back against you. You're able to kill them pretty fine. But you're a depth 1000 Bone Shatter Jug, and you go up and fight a all, and it's a 15-minute fight. Because that thing has a lot of HP relative to your damage. The thing is, though, after that point, this HP never increases. Ever. It's the same forever. From then until the end of time, it never changes. So you only need to get to the point where you're at about 30 to 35 times, and the bosses will HP cap. From this point on, the bosses will never gain more HP, but they will gain damage. They will also gain ailment threshold. This is your bonus trivia question, right? When the bosses hit HP cap for the first time, they tend to have 2.147 billion health. But the way most bosses work in this game is because things like shock are really unbalanced against a monster that has a ton of HP. So builds that depend on chill and shock would almost never chill or shock a full HP boss. Because of that, while rares and stuff, their ailment threshold is equal to their HP. Specifically for like pinnacle bosses, the ailment threshold is about 1/10 of their HP. It's coded in the game as 2 separate numbers. The base HP of a Kurgal or an all is 72 million or 62 million. Let me open this up. PoEDB all. But the ailment threshold is going to be a lower number. It's going to be like 6 million. So if I go to all Vaal City boss and I go to 84 zone, okay? Like I said, 62 million base HP, but his ailment threshold is only about 1/10 of that. So this is only a 7 million ailment threshold. So as he starts to get deeper and deeper, his ailment threshold will actually keep going up. So after HP cap, the shocks will still keep going down. This is not necessarily the most useful number, but there actually is an ailment cap, an ailment threshold cap, and it's not what you'd expect. This is your $1 million trivia question. When I say there's only 2 to 3 people in the game that know all these things, this is probably the single most obscure cap. Like, this is the most obscure number that the least people in Path of Exile know the answer to this. What is the ailment cap in Path of Exile? If you've been listening to me talk so far, you probably know, you probably have a good hunch that it's also 2.147 billion. That's a good guess. Oddly enough, it's not. For whatever weird reason, it's 800 mil. I know that doesn't make a ton of sense. Here, let me get a 17 Divine Cell. This is actually good to show in the video because I'm going to be talking about Delve money later and how you make money in Delve. Well, this is a Delve drop. This map drops from the Ahuatolti boss, and it's I just sold it for 17 Divines. See, good video content. All right, it's actually 800 million. I have no clue why it's that number, but last league in Crucible there was a Mjolnir modifier that said you freeze as if dealing 300% more damage, or 200% more damage, so times 3, and you could get that on both Shield and Mjolnir for Mana Bond. So you could freeze as if dealing 9 times damage. Because the HP cap because the ailment cap is only 800 million. It was very possible to get a permafreeze build with only like 100 mil DPS. Whereas if the ailment threshold was actually 2 billion, you would have needed like closer to 300 mil DPS, which is not achievable. So like that's a weird example where that ailment cap being 800 mil comes into effect. Because I could have had a permafreeze build with Mjolnir in Crucible League. Maybe they'll bring that modifier back, we'll see. But just an oddball fact there. But so what happens as you start to get deeper though, is you get to the point here where the unique bosses kind of stop scaling. And then everything else just keeps catching up. So you keep getting deeper and deeper, and now you're at the point where bosses are no longer the hardest node. Like, maybe you were that Bone Shider Jug who's, like, kept gearing and kept going deeper. And now you're at, like, depth 2500. And now the alls, you're still tanky enough to live them, so their HP hasn't changed, and you've maybe found more damage, so now they're actually dying faster and faster and faster. Now instead of taking 15 minutes, they take 5 minutes. So they just keep getting easier. But at this point, though, everything else relative to bosses has got 8 times as much HP now, because, you know, the boss is capped at 30 times, and everything else is at 250 times now. So now the rares are starting to get way tankier. And you actually start to run into scenarios, honestly, as early as like 1500, where with archnemesis modifiers, the rares are actually tankier than the tankiest bosses. Because, like, I can fight a boss that has 2 billion health, and I can kill it really fast. Or I could fight an HP capped rare at like depth 5000 that also has 2 billion health now. Except that rare has crit reduction, which is times 5. Cycling damage reduction, which is times 5. Now it effectively has 50 billion health. And like just those 2 modifiers makes it 25 times tankier than like, you know, a boss. So people sometimes say like, oh yeah, the hardest rare is harder than the hardest boss. That's really not true outside of Delve. People try to say that like, oh, this essence monster with 7 deafening essence was harder than a pinnacle boss. Probably not. That's probably not the case. I don't think you can juice a rare enough to be harder than an uber pinnacle boss. But in Delve, that is absolutely the case. The hardest rare monsters in Delve are insane. I personally kill bosses on this build in like sub 1 second. I'll show you this here, okay? This is a clip of a 2.4k Beyond boss, which also has 62 billion base HP. This boss is called Katash, and it has HP cap. This is how fast I kill it. I have a very powerful build, so spoiler. I'm just going to keep pressing the back key because this is a 0.3 second kill. Okay? I'm just gonna. It's entertaining to me. It's it's therapeutic. But yeah, I killed this max HP monster in 0.3 seconds. My build has around 10 billion damage DPS. It's probably the highest DPS build in the game at maximum ramp. I need to ramp for a couple seconds to get to this point. I don't instantaneously have this much damage. But if you let my build ramp for a couple seconds, I do about 10 billion DPS. So I kill max HP monsters very, very, very fast. Probably the fastest that any build's ever killed them in the history of this game. Oops. That being said, I have fought time loss nodes where the essence monster in Delve took me 5 minutes to kill. I have some highlight clip here where it was a 5-minute fight. So think about that. My build took 5 minutes to kill a rare monster. Just because it had all these archnemesis tank mods, and it also had recovery, and it also had 2 billion HP. So you start to get to a point in Delve where the rares become much harder than the bosses. So this is where things really change when people start to get deep. The hardest things are no longer alls. The hardest things are now like time lost rares and beyond nodes, because it's the rares that are a problem. So this is going to kind of bring the transition into what we'll call deep delve, okay? I've talked about HP cap enough. You kind of understand it now, hopefully. But let's talk deep delve, okay? I'm going to be going to 6,000 this league. There's 8 days and some change left in the league. In these 8 days, I will be making it to 6,000, which is the bottom. Delve stops scaling after 6,000. That's why if you check on PoE Ninja, you'll see people quit at 6,000. It's because 6,000 is the end. Delve is the hardest content in Path of Exile, and 6,000 is the bottom. So if you make it to 6,000 depth, you've beat the hardest thing in Path of Exile. So I will also be making it to 6,000 this league. I'm 644 away, which should only take me like 4 days. I have 8 days left in the league, so maybe by the time you're watching this video, getting ready for 323, I'll probably already be 6k delve. But I decided I'd go ahead and make this video while I'm still progressing. I might lose motivation to come back and make it if I finish the goal. So let's talk just the actual change in difficulty as you get this deep. So I've said this is a deep delve video, but what does deep delve mean? This is a very subjective term. Sometimes people say deep delve and they mean like 1,000. Sometimes people say deep delve and they mean like 6,000. Generally, what people consider deep delve is pretty much whatever depth, deeper than whatever depth they're at. It's a very selfish definition. If someone's at depth 2k, they consider 2k or deeper as deep delve, and 1k is shallow. If someone's at 1k delve, their opinion on what deep delve is, 1k or deeper is deep delve. 500 shallow. Everyone tends to call whatever depth they're at deep delve, and every depth deeper than that is deep delve, and every depth shallower than that is not deep delve. It's a very gate-kept term. But here's the honest answer, okay? There's a quote. To a canary, a cat is a monster. Well, to a cat, a pit bull is a monster. It's all relative. So for some people 600 is deep. For some people 1,500 is deep. For some people, it all depends on what your goals are, what your build is, what your investment is. It's all a relative term. So what I am considering for this video, the definition is a very, very broad range. I'm gonna call it like 600 to 6,000. That's a huge range, but that's really the range that things start to change from like the shallower depths. So maybe you're a canary who wants to progress through 600 and just make some money. Maybe you're a cat at 1,000 who wants to fight some HP cat monsters. Maybe you're a pit bull at depth 2,000 who wants to push to a harder challenge. Or maybe you're a Tyrannosaurus Rex at depth 6,000 that maybe didn't know some of the cap things I've talked about so far, but it's all relative. I'm going to go over what's pretty much 600 to 6,000 in this video. So, that being said, let's talk the scaling of Delve in two aspects. The azurite cart and the numbers. Let's do numbers briefly first. The numbers in Delve, the HP cap actually, or the HP actually ramps from 1,000 to 1,500. It ramps steeper than after 1,500, because when Delve League was added, the cap was 600. And then after people made it to 600, they increased the cap to 1,500. After people made it to 1,500 with like cheesy immunity builds and party play, they increased it to 3,000. And after that, they doubled it again to 6,000. So now there's no limit after 6,000. And for a while there, when they increased the limit after 6,000, it was bugged and the zones didn't have any modifiers. Since the Scourge rework, that's not the case. It just stopped scaling at 6,000. There's still full modifiers. But because of those increases in depth throughout history, there's different thresholds that happen at 600, 1,500, and 6,000. But 600 and 1,500 are kind of the like reward thresholds, let's call them. And then a few other things happen at those cutoffs. But at 1,500, they made it so that the HP increase was completely linear from that point on. After 1,500, every percent HP increase per node is completely linear. So by the time you get to like 3,000 to 5,000, you're starting to get to the point where rares have the HP cap. And by like 6,000, maybe some very tanky blues with like some one-off tank mods could potentially in a Monster Life zone have HP cap, maybe. But the damage, it works really differently though. While the HP scaling is very smooth, you'll notice here the damage scaling is a really weird looking graph because it actually doesn't really change too rapidly until about 600. Like even at depth 600, it's only a 1.49 times multiplier. It doesn't really start to ramp up very fast. Even at 500, it's only like a 30% multiplier. It's not bad. But it really, really climbs up until 1145. There's a damage soft cap at 1145 where it reaches 331%. And after that, it really, really smooths off. And then starting like 2,500, it turns into an exponential jump where it's 25% more damage every 1,000 depth. So every time you go from 3,000 to 4,000, it's 25% more damage. 4,000 to 5,000, 25% more damage. 5,000 to 6,000, 25% more damage. So it gets really aggressive around the 1K to 1,200 mark. And then after that, it doesn't actually get that much more dangerous for a while. If your build is able to get to 1150, you kind of do have the tankiness to make it to like 3,000. It's not that much more dangerous at 3,000 than it is at 1,100. But then it starts to get really dangerous up until about 6,000. Let's talk azurite cart. You've maybe seen some people in Deep Delve and their azurite cart. So right now I just did a node at 1,500 whatever, or 800. So you'll see my azurite cart looks capped. But what happens if I complete a node down farther? Oh, 53. Let me go complete this node real quick. I'll just talk while I talk about this, because this will update my cart. So you'll notice here that my cart radius is really small. And you'll also notice that if I do take any darkness damage, it's a lot. I have absolutely no darkness res. It's like negative 1,200%. My cart radius is kind of the same. It's like negative 1,500%. If you ever watch people do Deep Delve, their cart stats will be, every single thing will be in the red and will be at the absolute most negative amount. This is normal because after depth 2,000, it's not possible to have things positive anymore. The most you can get them to is 0 technically. But the thing is, you probably will not be able to keep up with the cost after about 12 or 1,300, because what happens is when you start progressing through the depths, you basically start off at like depth 100, and you start upgrading your azurite cart. And by depth 200 or 300, you've got all your stats kind of caught up. And at that point, you might even start to go positive on azurite with like your darkness res, cart radius, and flare radius. And then you're just going for the other upgrades like more flares, more sulfite capacity, more dynamite damage, stuff like that, which we'll talk about later. That dynamite damage can help you. But after about 1,000, the costs start to really ramp up faster and faster and faster. And after 1,000, you can't really keep up anymore. Oh, there's the guy. Let's kill him. Oh, don't run away from me. Alright, there's a good example of the darkness damage immunity there. Alright, so hopefully this updates my azurite cart if I, because I did that node. I think I have to go to my hideout first or log out to reset it. But I'll show you, by about 1,100 then, the costs keep ramping up higher and higher, and there's my azurite cart. This is what it typically looks like. By 1,200, your azurite you've saved up, if you've been diligent about saving, just keeps going farther and farther down. And this league, I made it to about 1,300 depth, where I just finally couldn't keep up with the cost anymore. And the cost just starts to skyrocket so high that the stats start to go negative. And then they go farther negative, and farther negative, and farther negative. And then you get to the point where you just give up on them, because after negative 200, it doesn't matter. Because there's an interesting mechanism that works here. So, the radius has a minimum amount where it doesn't go below, like, the absolute minimum. And I don't know what the exact percentage on that is, but it's probably around negative 200. After negative 200, there's no difference between negative 200 and negative 2,000. It's all the same. So once you get to that point, you have no sense in upgrading the cart anymore. However, darkness res, this is a fun Path of Exile fact. Ready? In this game, resistances cap out normally at 75%. Max res caps at 90. But most people don't know there's a minimum res cap. The minimum res cap in Path of Exile is 200, negative 200. If you've ever played a Doriani's prototype build, people did this in Lake of Calandra League. They'd play Lake of Calandra with like negative 100 lightning res on both rings and amulet. And they could easily get to like negative 400 lightning res during Lake. The thing is, res caps at negative 200. So there's no point in doing that. So anyone who's played Doriani's prototype probably is aware of that negative 200 cap. Oddly enough, darkness resistance is treated as a normal Path of Exile resistance, so it also caps at negative 200. It does a little bit of flat damage to you, plus a % damage to you, and it ramps every quarter second, more and more stacks until it can basically kill you. And at deep depth with like really, really negative darkness res, darkness can kill you in like 2 seconds. If you saw Ben's hardcore death at 1800, he died to like 8 stacks of darkness, which is 2 seconds. He got darkness bombed and then just got darkness degen to death, and then he couldn't leech because darkness also makes monsters immune to damage. His recovery is based off some amount of leech, which means he wasn't leeching anymore, and he died in 2 seconds to darkness. But the thing is, beyond negative 200, it's all the same. So that's why when you see people deep delve, they only ever they really only upgrade. Sometimes they don't even upgrade it at all. Like Mirror was rank 1 at delve in Sanctum League, and his cart was negative 3150 for all 3 stats the whole time. He literally never spent a single azurite on a single upgrade of his cart the entire time. From depth 1, he just delved with no darkness and no radius because that's what he's used to, and that's what he's going to end with anyways. So he didn't screw around wasting azurite on like the meaningless upgrades. I try to keep up a little bit, but this is the main reason you don't see people upgrade their cart past that point. The other reason is because azurite can buy resonators. Now, resonators are worth like 75 to 1 right now. So 75 of these 1-socket resonators is worth a divine. So 75 times 300 means for every 22k azurite, you can get a divine. Which means if you're someone who has 3.328 million azurite, that means that's 150 divines worth of azurite. So you could understand why a person who's used to playing with negative 200 darkness resistance would just get used to it and then not spend 150 divines on an upgrade that they're used to not having. But let me just show you right now an illustration on how costly this darkness res is. Because see this 150 divines worth of azurite? The things I do for content. So, something interesting that happens here. Remember, every darkness res below 200 doesn't matter. Because negative 200 and negative 2 million is the same. It caps at negative 200. This means the first actual upgrade that does anything is this upgrade right here. Because that puts me to 180. This is the first actual darkness upgrade that you can get in this game. This makes you take, instead of 200% increased damage from darkness, you take 180%. This is the single first upgrade, and it costs grand total 4 million azurite. Because remember, I already had positive azurite, or positive darkness res up till 1300, so I'd been spending azurite up to like a 32k cost per upgrade. I'd already spent like 700 or 800k when I started spending just now. So my total spent on this right here is like 3.6 million. So it costs almost 200 divines to get this first upgrade. But I could do a few more of these too. Now instead of taking 300% from darkness, I'm taking 220. So I'm now 36% tankier to darkness after deleting like close to 200 divines. You can maybe understand why people don't do this now. But I figured I'd show this for the video, just how costly it is. So all of these numbers cap out at 2,000 depth. After depth 2,000, you see this right here. The penalty for depth says negative 3150. That is what you achieve at depth 2,000. After 2,000, it's all the same. It never goes up again. So the nice thing is, though, if you do actually get to cap, it stays there. It never scales higher again, but it's just so absurdly costly to get that point. Like, I'm at depth 53, 59, and that was most of my azurite, and I still don't have it finished yet. So you kind of, if you are going to deep delve, just kind of get used to delving without any of the card stats. That's kind of, if you go deeper than like 1,000, you're going to just have to accept that. Especially deeper than 1,500, you're just going to have to accept that you're not going to have the card stats. All right. Well, let's talk money now. I don't know if I'm following the same order I said I was going to follow, but let's talk money. Because like I said, that was 150 divines worth of azurite that I could have converted with one socket resonators. So there are a few ways to make money in Delve, and that's one of them. Although it's not the biggest share of the pie chart. Azurite conversion, I can probably make around 1 to 2 divines an hour, and that probably represents like 15 to 20% of the money from delving. Delve is a really weird league mechanic in this sense. Pretty much every league mechanic in Path of Exile is balanced around each other in a trade league just because of supply and demand and how economy works. If there's 10 different league mechanics in this game that all produce something of value, and different people like doing different things, if all of them are balanced around making 5 divines an hour, and one of those things is suddenly only making 3 divines an hour, then less people will do that, and they'll start doing the things that are making 5 divines an hour. Or maybe there's one outlier that's making 7 divines an hour, and then they'll do that. Well, then all those people that jump ship to do the thing that's making 7 divines an hour now, you'll now have a greater supply for approximately the same demand, and that 7 divine an hour league mechanic will start to come back down. Now no one's doing the thing that makes 3 divines an hour, and so it starts to rise up to 5 divines an hour, where people will jump back to doing it. So trade leagues kind of self-equalize the currency making because of this effect. But the difference between Delve and all those other league mechanics is that those other league mechanics are pretty normalized in their income, and it's fairly independent of how strong your character is. Because the thing is, like, even if you're farming delirium juice maps, magic finding, all that stuff, The difference in clear speed between your build and a build that's worth 10 times as much is probably not that much. Like a 50 divine build can clear Crimson Temples pretty fast. A 500 divine build can clear Crimson Temples maybe like 20 or 30% faster. 10 times the cost and like 20 to 30% the income. Okay. There's other things that are completely independent of your build level, like heist, you know. If you make 6 divines an hour in heist, it doesn't really matter if you have a 20 mirror build. You're still going to make 6 divines an hour in heist. That's the opposite end of the spectrum. Delve is a mechanic on the far extreme the other way, where the money is really dependent on how strong your character is. Like, really dependent. If you're delving at depth 200, you are not making money delving. It is not good money. Don't waste your time. The first threshold where delve starts to become good money is about 600. Remember, like I said, 600 used to be the cap, so there are different things that cap at different depths, and the most common numbers is 600 and 1500. At depth 600, there's a cap for the frequency that all cities appear. On league start, alls are worth a lot of money. This league, for the first 2 to 4 weeks of the league, the average all kill, based off the price of an unidentified amulet, which is a 50 to 60% drop rate, the price of Crown of the Tyrant, and the price of the charge rings, the average all kill for a several week span this league was 7 divines. So, if you're at depth 600 and you're finding like an all per hour, with a good sample size, you're making like 7 divines an hour just off all, as well as maybe 1 divine an hour off azurite, and maybe like 3 to 4 divines off of like rare fossils. But, alright, so I said a couple other things there that's money. So, we talked about azurite from Nico converting into 1-socket resonators being money. All on league start particularly is a decent amount of money. But like 20 minutes ago, you guys saw me sell a map for 17 divines. Toward the end of the league, the Doriani's Maze maps go up really high in price. Like the end of last league, I was selling these for 26 divines. Like these don't start off super expensive, but by the end of leagues, people need this to get their 40 challenges complete. So people pay a lot of money for this. So the start of the league, Ahuatol's bad money. And by the end of the league, he's good money because of this one map. He's also got the fragment piece that's worth like a divine. But on league start in particular, all is really good money. And then over time, that starts to go down in value because really all but the envy necks start to really depreciate in value. But there's another thing that starts to go up in value as the league goes on, and that's rare fossils. You'll see in my inventory I have some of these fossils. I have a glyphic fossil, faceted fossil, fractured fossil, and in here I have hollow fossil. Alright? These 4 fossils are only from their specific node. Later in the video, I'll go over the ways to beat all these, because they're different levels of challenge. But these are the 4 money fossils, and as the league goes on, they tend to go up in price. At the peak this league, glyphic fossils were worth 3/4 of a divine, and if I was just targeting glyphics, I could probably easily farm like 5 to 10 per hour. Faceted peaked at about 0.6 divines. Let's call them half. Hollow peaked at like 100 chaos, so like not like 0.4 divines. Fractured weren't a lot this league, but in Crucible League they were like half a divine. But like, if I delve for an hour and I just go really fast at depth 1500 and I just look for fossils the entire time, I could probably make close to 10 divines an hour just off these fossils, just targeting these fossils. And the reason I say 1500 is, remember we talked about different caps in this game? 1500 is where the fossil rate caps, or at least it's hard to prove otherwise. But like by 1500, so at depth 200, let's go back to depth 200. These are all tied to a specific zone. So in the blue zones, you get the glyphic fossils. In these kind of orangish tan zones, I'm colorblind, so don't yell at me, you get the faceted fossils. In the red zones, you get the faceted fossils, which is the second most valuable. And in the kind of like gray zones, you get the crystal spires for the hollowed fossils. But if you're at depth 200 and you look at these, you'll notice that like in the tan zones, they should be humid fissures, but they're all smugglers stashes. That's because at shallow depth, all you're going to get in these zones is smuggler stashes. When you see a fossil icon, it's probably just a smuggler stash. Like, if this was deeper in the blue zone, a fossil node would be a glyphic fossil. But because I'm at depth 190, it's a smuggler stash. But as you get deeper and deeper, the percent chance this has to be a glyphic fossil keeps going up and up. So by the time you get to 1500, if you encounter a fossil node that's in one of those zones, it's over a 90% chance to be the money fossil. So this should be molten cavity because it's in a red zone, and at 1500 it is. The tan zone, this should be a humid fissure. It is. If I go and look at more of these, they should all be the money fossil. This should be a time loss because it's in a blue zone. Oh, it's a smuggler stash. There's the 10% chance. This should be a molten. It's a molten. So it's never 100%, but there's also bias here too because on the way down, I hit all the time loss nodes and stuff. So chances are I already passed through the money fossils and skipped the smuggler stashes. But like this should be a time lost. It's a time lost. That's 2/3 of divine. So once you're down to like 1600, 90% chance if you see a rare fossil node, this should be a molten cavity. It's a molten cavity. By the time you're this deep, they should all be the money fossil, like 90+% of the time. And these money fossils are worth like half a divine a piece. You just farm those. So that's like the other way to make money. It's boss drops, rare fossils, azurite conversion. There is a fourth category, however, that's rare, but sometimes you'll get a drop that's worth like double-digit divines because Delve has Delve-specific mods that they can only drop in Delve. And some of these mods are really good for certain builds, but there's a chance for them to drop fractured, like a 1 in 10 chance that they drop fractured. And then it has to hit the Delve mod, so it's even rarer. But there's some items that you can get from the fractured Delve mod that are worth a lot of money. Like, I've sold a fractured helmet that had Fizz taken as Ellie for double-digit divines. I sold a fractured convoking wand with minions are aggressive for like 19 divines. There's just a couple of these oddball fractured bases that have a fractured Delve modifier that are sometimes worth double-digit divines. So that's kind of the fourth category of money. Alright. So I said this is going to be a long video. We're probably over the 30-minute mark, so I'm going to take a brief drink of Mountain Dew here. Like I said, I'll timestamp all of this. So the last thing I'm going to show is I'm going to do some of these nodes, okay? And I'm going to show you how I do them. I'll start with the bosses. So it looks... Actually, hang on. There's two more categories I have to go over, okay? There's archnemesis and number requirements. I'm gonna go over those categories, then I'll get to the demos. All right. So let's talk archnemesis. Archnemesis is something where if you have a very strong build in mapping, you probably don't realize anything to do with archnemesis because you just kill things in one hit. But because of the way Delve works, where by the time you get deeper and deeper, the hardest monsters to fight are rare monsters, because once again, they also have HP cap. But then they have all these crazy tank mods from archnemesis that make them like 20 times tankier. Rare monsters are the scariest thing in Delve. So, while above ground in mapping, archnemesis is not a big deal. In Deep Delve, archnemesis is a very, very big deal. So I'm going to go over what some of the hardest mods are, just real quick, and maybe why a build would struggle with them and how you maybe would counter them. But a lot of people sometimes, you'll see someone on Reddit say that like Soul Eater's the worst mod in the game. Soul Eater should not be in Deep Delve. I made this full list a while back, and Soul Eater was the 17th hardest modifier in Delve. There were 16 modifiers harder than Soul Eater. I deleted that list and just remade this in 30 seconds before the video, but let's go through the problem modifiers, okay? the first one I'm going to say is Mana Siphoner. Clearly, I have a bias to Mana Siphoner because I'm playing a mana build. But Mana Siphoner is the archnemesis ability that screws over pretty much every deep delve build. There are only 3 builds this league that are going to make it to depth 6,000. The third is my build, which is a mana stacker. The first is armor stacker. And the second is Eye of Winter. Now, Eye of Winter has a little bit better defense against Mana Siphoner, but pretty much every league that there's a build that makes it to 6,000, they typically have the same defensive package where they have 100% of Fizz converted to Ellie, and then they have all of their armor applying to elemental damage. So first they get 90 max res to reduce it by 9 times, 10 times, whatever. Then they get another 90% reduction from armor, so they have a 99% damage reduction. That applies to hits. So they have a 99% damage reduction to hits. And they have a very small actual life or ES pool. And they're just relying on their massive hit reduction to stay alive. Those builds look very tanky. And these are typically like the rank 1 delve builds, because they can deal with the onslaught of big hits very nicely. The reason that Mana Siphoner is a trouble for them is because it's a degen. It's a lightning damage degen that will just oftentimes kill them. So there's ways to mitigate this, but the builds that have low ES pools or low life pools with crazy high hit reduction, they oftentimes get screwed by Mana Siphoner. Temp Bubble for the builds I play is like the worst mod in the game. Executioner is a mod that makes it so you can't recover above half. This is a really big problem in Delve because there's a lot of nodes you'll fight, the hardest ones, where there's multiple rares on top of each other. And what this mod essentially does is it makes your HP pool half. So this basically, since most delve builds have really high recovery and only die to one-shots, this mod basically says double damage. But it's worse than that, because this mod doesn't double the damage of the Executioner mob. It doubles the damage of everything. So if you're in a Beyond node and there's 10 monsters, or 10 rare monsters, by one single one of them having Executioner, if you're in that Executioner range and you're stuck at half, every other monster there effectively hits you for double because you only die to one-shots. So your this doubles the damage of every single monster on the screen. This is a good example of rare monsters stacking together and becoming more problematic the more that are stacked together. It's not the fact there's more monsters hitting you. It's the fact that they're all stacked together and their effects keep multiplying on top of you. Because there's another one that makes it so that you cannot recover. Imagine you cannot recover. This is just worse than Executioner for a lot of builds. It just stops all of your recovery. This kills you so many times. Allies are immune to damage. This used to be a rare modifier back in the day. They got rid of it because they said it was bad game design. And then they brought it back with archnemesis. There's an archnemesis modifier that just makes everything immune to damage. This is very problematic in Deep Delve. Corpse Explode does not do that much, actually. I should talk about this in a second. But on high base HP, like Essence monsters, this can kill you. Then there's the God Touch, then Soul Eater, then some of the other stuff can potentially be problematic, but Soul Eater doesn't increase the speed or max hit of the monster, so that's the reason Soul Eater's not a problem, is because if you're a build that is mobile, you can just kite it and it doesn't get any faster. If you're a build that's perfectly stationary in Delve, that's usually because you have a crazy recovery build that can only die to a one-shot. So if you can only die to one-shots and Soul Eater just increases attack speed, Soul Eater does not make the monster any more dangerous to you because you'll just recoup that much faster. If something's attacking once per second or 30 times per second, to a lot of deep delve builds, there's no difference because they have recovery. Corpse Explode, though, this is probably worth talking about real quick. Modifiers in Delve that are percent HP based do not work with depth scaling. So detonate dead does not work with depth scaling. If it did, every build would just run some form of detonate dead in Delve. What happens is on this HP multiplier, if a monster has 1,000,000 base HP and you corpse explode for 6% of its life, it does 60,000 damage. But if now that monster has 1,000,000 base HP and it has a 700 times multiplier and now it has 700 million HP and you corpse explode it for 6%, you might think that you're going to explode it for 6% of 700 million and have a corpse explode with a base damage of 42 million. Nope. That is not how that works. You will still get a base explosion of 60k because it's based off of the HP before depth multipliers. So anything that's affected by the base HP does not work. It applies before the depth multiplier gets applied. So that's why corpse explode is not actually good in deep delve. Although the flip side of that is there is a zone modifier. If you read right here that says monsters gain 43% of maximum life as extra maximum energy shield. If you're at depth 200 and you get a boss that has this modifier, it's really troubling because these bosses have 60 million health. If you're a build that is struggling to do 60 million damage, and then you just slap on a modifier that gives it a 30 mil energy shield that keeps recharging whenever it does its phase, like all does this phase where he goes immune to damage like every 20 seconds. So if you can't even chip through his shield in that time, you'll never kill him. The good news is this is not affected by depth. So he has a 30 million shield at depth 200, but even at depth 6k, his shield is still just 30 million. So in deep delve zones, this modifier is a freebie. It does absolutely nothing. Monsters that have 1 billion health that get an extra shield of like 500k, it does nothing. So that's like the flip side good thing is this modifier is a dead mod, even though Corpse Explode doesn't work. Alright. Last thing I'm going to talk about before I get into demonstrations is number requirements and scaling. Okay? So, typically in Delve, there's a certain defensive requirement. Now, I'm going to open up this POB of mine. And I'm going to... Oh, let's just do that. 1 second stationary, whatever. Okay. My elemental max hit is about 200k. That's without Arcane Cloak up, though. So with my 18k Arcane Cloak, my max elemental hit is about 350k. I would say, to make it to depth 6000, the single most important defensive requirement is you need to have a max elemental hit of about 200k. And then you need to be able to have enough recovery to get that back at least once per second. Okay? So, maybe you're a build... There's a lot of it depends here, okay? I played Mjolnir to 5300. My Mjolnir build had a max elemental hit of about 200k. However, it was only recovering about 30% of its energy shield per second. Once I got an ES gain on hit, Watcher's Eye, then it was over 100%. It had crazy recovery and would just constantly go back to full, and it felt like way tankier. But I made it to 5300 without an ES gain on hit Watcher's Eye, with only 30% recovery, with a 200k max hit. But that's because I was playing a build that had 80% evasion and was constantly moving while cycloning and almost never getting hit. I was just cycloning in a circle at full speed constantly with 80% evasion. So I remember I had this discussion where I was convinced I was getting hit like once per second. And I went back and I watched a tier 3 Azurite node, and I was actually only getting hit about once every 5 seconds. So it depends on the build. It depends how much you're moving. If you are a build that's perfectly stationary, you need to have at least 100% of your recovery per second. My Mana Forge Arrow build does this with Instant Leech. Like Aya Winter does this with the Blood Notch and Progenesis. It staggers all the damage, and then it has the Blood Notch recoup. Bone Shatter does this with self-harm recoup. Armor Stacker does this with ES or life gain on hit. Because they have very, very tiny HP pools. And they're hitting a shit ton of times with Molten Strike. So they're gaining like 20,000 life per second. But I would say the defensive requirement to get to 6k is you need to have about a 200k elemental max hit. Sometimes people point out that my Chaos and Fizz max hit are low compared to the others. This is going to be a controversial take, but this is correct. Chaos and Fizz max hit are basically worthless. There's just almost nothing in this game that does Fizz or Chaos damage. There are 2-ish nodes that do Chaos damage in Delve, and then there's the Chaos Weaver Archnemesis mob, and then there's the Chaos Explosion Archnemesis mob. Those are the only things that really have any requirement for Chaos Res, and I still do just fine with those. Like, I know I still have this on my screen right now. You'll see my Deathless streaks between like 4 and 5k. Even with a max Chaos hit of 57k, I was only taking, like actually, do I even have... Whatever. I was rarely... Like, I was going 100+ streaks without dying. And I think all but one of those streaks was to elemental damage. Like, I have a fairly consistent build, even though it looks like my HP is bouncing around a lot. But, really, I almost never die to anything but elemental damage. So even though my POB is really top-heavy on elemental defense, like, I even had the opportunity on my boots to craft 35 Chaos Res as a suffix. But instead, I used the Essence modifier for 5% reduced elemental damage taken while stationary. That's because Ellie max hit is so much more important overall. Even if you're extremely lopsided toward Ellie max hit, it just matters so much more than everything else. Like, I know people always say, oh, yeah, well, my effective hit pool is that... Effective hit pool means nothing. If you open a Path of Building and look at the effective hit pool, this means absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. There are builds out there, because the effective hit pool calculates based off of things like recovery and small hits and stuff. So if you put on an Aegis Aurora and you recover like 5k energy shield on block, you can have a build that has a 100k elemental max hit, and the EHP in Path of Building will say like 2 million or like infinity. That's pointless. It's absolutely pointless. Because I'm also recovering all of my ES like every single game tick. I only die to a one-shot. So whether they're recovering all that on block, or I'm just instant leeching it all back with a gajillion hits at the same time, because I do like over 100 hits per second per monster, I'm also recovering to full every single fraction of a second. So it really just comes down to what's your max hit. Do not pay attention to EHP. It is max hit, and specifically elemental max hit, that matters. Fizz max hits only matters if you're playing Bone Shatter. Everything that's dangerous in not just Delve, but in all of Path of Exile, every single thing is elemental damage. The hardest hitting Fizz hit in all of Path of Exile outside of Delve is an Uber Shaper Slam. I don't have a clip handy, but Uber Shaper Slams hit my character for less than 2k. It knocks me down to like 27 out of 29k. It is so far away from being remotely dangerous, and that is the hardest Fizz hit in Path of Exile without depth scaling. And it hits me for like 1800. Really, the only things in the entire game that are dangerous, including Delve, is an elemental hit. So when I talk about defense, I'm talking elemental max hit. My build has a really high elemental max hit. This is an Uber Maven Brain Nova. It knocks me down all the way to 20k. So, yeah, the only thing that really matters is Ellie max hit. So, I would say to get to 6k, you need to have about 200k Ellie max hit, and either 100 plus recovery per second, or a significantly bigger max hit. So you're essentially recovering 200k elemental max hit per second. So maybe you have 600k ele max hit and you're recovering 30% per second somehow. That would be fine. But the only exceptions is if you're a very evasive character. You can get away with less recovery if you have a lot of layers of evasion, like actual evasion, dodge, mobility. Like if your character's moving around really fast with like either phasing or just high movement speed, whatever. Like Mjolnir was like that. Let's talk damage. I would say the damage requirements for Deep Delve are bare minimum, I'm going to say 100 million. The lowest DPS character I think that has ever made it to close to 6k was Oscar. Oscar is like, has a page in the history books for Delve because he made it to 5,930 depth in hardcore. Now, the big asterisk here is this was before the Lake of Calandra archnemesis rework, where they made archnemesis the core game mechanic for rare monsters, which made the game a lot harder, particularly for Deep Delve. And then all these mods came in that are just terrible. So this was at a time before archnemesis, so the game was a lot easier. But still insanely impressive. He made it to depth 5,900 with like 70 million DPS. Because he had dot cap from Poison Spark, and then he had like 30 mil hit DPS. That's the... If you play to 6k with 70 mil DPS, it is painful. It is absolute pain and misery. Even 100 mil feels kind of low. I would say 150 to 200 is about when Deep Delve starts to feel pretty comfortable. I think the Eye of Winter builds have around 150 mil. Like I saw a couple clips of someone at 6k playing Eye of Winter, and they were fighting like an HP cap Crystal Spire. And it took them like 20 seconds to kill it. And that's like probably the lower end of what's acceptable. But like I've been used to playing a build with billions of DPS, so to me that looks low. But they're very tanky and very consistently tanky, so they can get away with that. So if you're insanely tanky, you can get away with about 100 mil minimum. The less tanky you are, the more you're going to want to push even higher. You can have some like Giga Armor Stacker or Eye of Winter build, which the Eye of Winter build is probably going to get gutted without tattoos. I would say that's going to fall off next league with no tattoos. It's going to be down to just Armor Stacker probably. But insanely tanky builds can get away with like 100 million. The less tanky you get, the more DPS you're going to want to get. Some combination of either like infinite tankiness and 100 mil, or like pretty high tankiness and like 200 mil. Or you can maybe be fairly glassy if you have like a billion DPS. And by fairly glassy, I mean like 120k max ele hit. You're in softcore. That 120k with a lot of recovery. You'll still die to like big hits from rares, but if you're killing them almost instantly, that's fine. You'll have random deaths and whatnot, but like if you have like 500 mil plus, you can probably get away with like 120k. But I would say those are like the minimum requirements for damage and tankiness. And then the final thing you really need is some source of recovery. You can get away with low recovery, like I said, if you have insanely good chance to avoid hits, like evasion, movement, whatever. But for the most part, you need some source of high recovery. And the mechanics that typically do this are the Blood Notch Progenesis combo that Eye of Winter uses. So they use all this flask effect from tattoos this league that's probably going to get nerfed into the ground next league when they get removed. And they stagger like 75% of their damage, meaning they take it over a dot, not up front. But then they have Recoup that completely counters that. So they just recoup 100% of damage taken, like probably over 100 with Blood Notch. And so they just achieve this like immortality by having more recoup than they have damage taken and staggering the damage. The other way is gain on hit, typically. Bone Shatter also relies on recoup, but it's self-harm recoup. So Bone Shatter and Eye of Winter have recoup to cover their recovery. Armor Stacker and my build rely on the on-hit effect, where when you hit a monster, you are recovering a set amount of your HP. So I have, every single time I hit something, I recover 1%, because I have instant leech. 10% of leech is instant, max ES leech is 10%, so that means 1% of my ES is recovered per hit. And like I said, I do over 100 hits per second per target, because each one of these little storm rain arrows does 4 hits. And there's 17 projectiles on the blast rain. I have 2 blast rains, and I have 4 attacks per second. So I have like 130 hits per second. So if I'm hitting four monsters on like a time lost, I have 500 hits per second. So that's 150,000 energy shield per second on 4 monsters. But you kind of need to have a source of really high recovery. Alright, it's time for some demos. Like I said, I'm going to timestamp these. Let me show you how I do some bosses, okay? And how I do some of the hardest nodes. I'll start with the bosses. So, I have a back-to-back here, I think, at 3792, it looks like. So, I'm going to try to show you guys the mechanics on these. Because, remember, I can kill these bosses in under a second, because I have a build with stupid damage. But I can't really show you the mechanics by doing that. So I'm going to deliberately do less damage on these to show you the mechanics, okay? We're gonna hopefully show you all of them. Kurgal doesn't really have much for mechanics, but he's gonna start the fight off, and he's pretty much instantly attackable. The other 2 bosses have like a 5-second RP period. But he's in this inner ring, he never moves. None of the 3 Delve bosses ever move. They always stay exactly in the center of the room. Kurgal has these, like, this cross shape where there's 4 paths out. What he does is he makes this, like, spiral, or not spiral, this, like, star pattern around him. And it's a bunch of beams. These beams they look like they'd be a dot. And if you watch your, like, ES move or your HP move, it looks like a dot. But it's actually a really, really fast ticking hit. Which is good for, like, armor builds, because it's fizz. That then gets somewhat converted to Ellie. But if you have good hit mitigation, you'll take no damage from this. Because it looks like a dot, but it is actually a very, very, very fast ticking hit. The next thing he'll have is this ability where he, like, charges up in the middle. And then he shoots this beam after you. This beam just chases you really slowly. You pretty much just have to run out and run away from it. Because when he's doing that, he has this, like, circle around him that's doing this every single thing is just this fast ticking fizz hit. So you'll take this fast ticking fizz hit inside this inner ring. So you have to get out of the inner ring. And then he chases you with the beam, and you just have to run away from the beam. That's pretty much the only mechanics he does in his first 100%. At 50%, he's going to do an ad phase where you just kill ads. It's pretty simple. During the ad phase, though, you'll see these orbs on the ground sometimes. He'll do this 2 or 3 times where all these, like, orbs build up, and then they all pop at the same time. If you get hit by the pop, that can kill you. It's pretty lethal. So try to look when all the orbs are building up and they start to, like, pulse bigger and bigger like they're about to pop. Try to look when they're all going to pop and dodge that. Staying on the outside makes it pretty easy if you just run circles around the outside. Then he comes back and you burn him 50 to 0. It's the same mechanics as P1. Unlike the other 2 bosses, though, Kurgal has a final phase where he resurrects at full HP, and he goes into his Chaos phase. His first phase is Fizz, his second phase is Chaos. The arena is going to fill up with all these little beams that chase you that do Chaos damage. This is very bad for my build, because I talked about having low Chaos hit, and how that usually doesn't matter. Well, since I usually kill him almost instantly, that's why it doesn't really matter for me, but if it's a long, drawn-out fight, this kind of does matter. But there's like 10 beams spread out throughout the arena that just like slowly rotate in circles that you want to dodge because they do chaos damage. And then his big ability in the final phase is, I think I had a clip of the week like 2 weeks ago where I died to this, but he like brings his hands back and he just does these giant chaos beams, and then he brings his hands together and he does this like Dragon Ball Z attack, and he does this giant clap beam. I would really recommend not getting hit by that beam. That is a it looks like an attack that you should probably not stand in. It's definitely an attack you should probably not stand in. So I'll show you the Kurgal. I'll DPS him slow just so I can show you some of the mechanics. I won't push him to half yet. I'll get him a little close. Okay, he's going to do this, like, charge up thing in the middle, and then he's going to have a beat. There he is. Nope, not yet. There's the beam. So this beam chases you about this fast. You just run away from it, because the whole circle in the middle is full of that pulsing damage. So you get out of the middle, because that's where the pulsing damage is, and then you get chased by the beam. These little pattern beams do the same hit damage. It's just this fast-ticking hit. But then he gets to 50%, he does the add phase. I think all the beams are the exact same damage. Like I said, in the add phase, there's going to be these little orbs that pulse on the ground that are going to explode. Try not to get hit by the explosion, because those will do a lot of damage if you stand in like 10 of them. They'll probably will kill you. Even if you're a fairly tanky character. Maybe an armor stacker would live that just fine, because it's all hits. But we'll see if I see the pulsing orbs. I haven't seen it yet. I still haven't seen it yet. There it is, over here. See? Those. Like, 10 of them just went off over here. Okay, he's going to come back out at half now. And then I'm going to push him to his last phase. Alright, I might die here. I could blow him up instantly like I did those other ones earlier in the video. But I'm going to deliberately show you the mechanics, so I'm going to try to not get hit here. He's going to do the clap here. Ready? Maybe I have to do damage to him first. Let me do some damage to him. Clap, come on. Here's the clap. Do not stand in this. It crosses over the whole arena, and then it starts behind him. It goes in a rotation pattern, and then it ends in front of him. And in front of him is the actual damaged part. There it is again. I'm going to be behind him. So you basically just want to... You want to end behind him, period. Alright, now I'm going to kill him now that I've shown you guys. I'll do one more clap here. There we go. These beams on the outside, they do a lot of chaos damage. If you have a good amount of chaos res and EHP, or if you're CI, it's not a big issue. But they can kill you if you have, like, my amount of chaos max hit. But yeah, that's Kurgal. This one had a pretty crazy amount of mods too. Like, he had 38 crit reduction to make him tankier. He had some energy shield, which, like we talked about earlier, doesn't really make a difference. But, so I'm going to show you next an all, because I have one of them here right afterwards. I marked this in my, on the way past it, because I'm like, oh, I can use that for the video later, because there was a Kurgal and an all right in front of each other. So I'm like, that'll be perfect to just chain 2 in a row for the video. So that's what I'm doing now, finally. I've saved that for like 1500 depth for this video. Alright. On these city travel nodes, all you have to do is click on the thing to complete it. But now I'm going to all. Let's talk about running, by the way. Most builds that do deep delve to like 6k, they use a weapon swap with the Perpetua shield and phase run, and they just turn on phasing, and then they run with phasing. This is probably the superior way to do it. I know it's not the way I do it, but the reason for that is you just run to the node as fast as possible and kill nothing, and then you start fighting once you get there. There's a couple reasons to do this, and there's a couple reasons why I don't do it. One of the reasons is because of, I don't have any, like, on-hit recovery, or, like recoup. So if I get hit by something, I'm just going to whittle away and die. I have almost no natural regen, and I have no recoup. So any hits I take, I'm going to slowly die. Builds, though, that have a lot of recoup, like Bone Shatter, it's fine to do that for example, because you can run, and if you do get hit by something, it doesn't really matter because you'll just recoup it. The other thing is, it's less fun for me. I know it's a silly reason, but I have more fun killing stuff on the way there. I still run very fast. Like, my character makes pretty good time from node to node while also killing everything. To me, it makes more sense playing an ARPG to do that. It's more fun that way. I know it's less efficient, but a typical deep delve build will use a weapon swap to phase run, And I like killing stuff. It's simple. Okay. We have all the Crystal King. This is the money one. This is the head honcho of Delve. This is the most famous boss. He drops the amulet. He drops Crown of the Tyrant. He drops the most expensive piece for charge rings. This is the money. If you can kill no other boss but this boss, you might do all right for money. Okay. How does this boss work? He starts off in the middle. He's got like 5 seconds of RP. Then he becomes attackable. He does not really any abilities at the beginning except for his slash attack and his arrow attack. So his slash attack is just like a cone in front of him. You can actually totally dodge all of these. If you just run circles around him, you can do the entire fight without ever getting hit. If you're just constantly running circles around him, he will never hit you. Everything he has is an attack, though. It's all evadable. So every single thing he does can be evaded with evasion, and I have 86 evasion, so I will almost never actually get hit. Or it can be dodged. So you'll see a lot of really skilled players that have, like, you know, leftover skill from the ZHP meta that can do alls without ever getting hit. And I also can do alls without ever getting hit because I can just kill them really fast. But at 85% health, he's going to go into his intermission phase. This intermission phase, he sends these charging warriors that charge after you wherever you're currently at in the room. He'll stay in the center, and he'll send charging warriors after you. These do damage when they pass through you. They do damage when they explode when they hit a wall. And then the trail they leave behind does like some ticking damage. So and if you're a really, really tanky like Jug build or Armor Stacker, or just, yeah, or Iowinter probably could too with Crazy Recoup, you can just stand right in front of him and recoup through it. Because if you're inside his prism right now, it doesn't knock you back. You can just stand directly in front of him and it won't knock you back. If you're a little farther back, it will knock you back. But it's easier to aim. Because if you're right in front of him, you might aim and empower these. If you're back here, it'll knock you back, but you won't empower. But if any of these hit these 8 crystals throughout the room, they empower him. I think he does get a damage reduction. I haven't proven this, but I've just experienced that when he gets empowered, he tends to take less damage, it feels like. But however, if he gets 4 of these crystals empowered, he gets access to another ability. We'll get to that later. After his first intermission, after 85%, he gets access to a new ability called Zemzamar. He yells Zemzamar. And then he does this gigantic circle that covers like 3/4 of the room. I would run out from that. Because what it does is it summons all these crystals on the ground that all explode upwards and just make these giant spikes that come out of the ground in this giant circle. So you could technically be in the circle and not get hit by anything. It's possible. You could also get hit by them and evade them because they are evadable. Or you could be standing in a spot that has like 4 of them overlapping and you could get shotgunned to death by getting hit by 4 of them at once. So I've had very tanky builds get one-shot by this because it got like super shotgunned. So the safe way to do this is when he says Zemzamar, get to the edge of the room. If you're fighting him on 100% increased AoE, it's even more dangerous. Because then it's pretty much the entire room. Only like the exit doorway will be safe. But then he goes to 50%, does an intermission where he just summons ads again. That's pretty much like all the bosses. The ad intermission is really simple. There's nothing special there. Just kill the ads, get out of it. Then he comes back out at 50%, and you just have the final burden. In the final burden to 0, he'll keep doing the intermission charge warriors. And like I said, if you ever get 4 of them empowered, he gets access to his final, most deadly ability. This is his bullet hell ability. It's scarier than Shaper's bullet hell. It's the most like projectile vomit ability in the entire game. There are so many projectiles in the arena. It's called Not, I think, is the name of the ability. And I happen to, after so much delving, I happen to speak Ancient Primordial Ice King. I'm fluent, actually. And I can translate for you. Not means log out. Because if you ever get to this ability, like ever, like you accidentally empowered 4 of them, and he yells Not, log out. If you want to save XP, log out. Just trust me, just log out. Because I'm going to try to live it here. But it is a very, very, very difficult ability to live. I'm going to try here, though. I might die to it. I'm going to show you the ability, and I'm going to try to live to it. We'll see. It's a depth 3800, but he's got double damage with cold, with onslaught. This might be hard to live. But, the final thing I'm going to show is how to do the charge warriors. So, this is how I do them, is how to get hit without empowering any of them every time. The way I do it is I come in between these two. By the way, this does not work on 100% AoE. Do not do this on 100% AoE. On 100% AoE, you pretty much have to tank them. Okay? Is I stand in between these two, directly in the center. If you're standing here, you're too far, you're going to empower this one. If you're here, you're going to empower this one. You have to be right where this stone is on the table. I stand here. The first charge warrior shoots toward me. Okay? Right when it's about to hit me, like it's like 2 feet away from me, I'm going to blink right here in between the portal and the crystal, like right here. Okay? If I wait until right when it's about to hit me, the second one will also be queued up to shoot there. So the second charge will also go there. I will then do the same thing. I will wait until the third one has almost hit me, and then I will move over here. And then the fourth one will go there as well. Then the fifth one will come here, and right when it's about to hit me, I move back to the middle. And then the sixth one goes there as well. And the first time he does this, there's only 6. He adds 1 every phase. That's kind of the soft enrage on the fight. If you are in a really, really long fight, he will sometimes do like 20 of these. At which point, you're going to have to either just tank them all, if you're on a tanky enough build, or it's going to be pretty much impossible to not get hit. That's the soft enrage. He keeps adding 1, but watch how I do this, and watch how I don't get hit. It's pretty easy. I'm going to phase him here instantly, because there's nothing to show in the first 15%. After this, though, there we go. Alright, so I'm going to stand here. Right when the first one's about to hit me, I'm going to blink. Watch this. Ready? Go. I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to go. I'm going to wait, I'm going to go. Alright. So, here's his arrow attack. Those hit very hard. That also did a lot of damage to me. I'm not going to kill him here. I'm not actually doing damage right now. I'm deliberately not doing damage because I want to show you something. Well, I'll show that in P2. Actually, no, I'll show that in the last phase. There's Zemzamar. See, it covers like 2/3 of the room. So you'll notice he should add another warrior here. I went in time, okay. He should add another warrior here. You can, if you need to, blink back to the middle here as he starts to add these. But there's another Zemzamar. So here's the intermission phase at 50. One thing to note about Zemzamar is it is stunnable. And the way you do that is with dynamite. So in Delve, this is something people don't really know about if they don't delve much, but dynamite, you see I have 7 there on my bar. Dynamite does damage. And it scales with your depth. So if you start to get into really hard content, it actually does like a lot of damage. On bosses, it does 2.75% per dynamite. So if you use 7 dynamite on a delve boss, it will do 20% of their HP, like 19%. So on bosses that you really struggle with, you can use dynamite to push phases faster or get extra damage. All right, he's back out. I'm gonna kill the Az, but I'm not gonna kill him. Okay. What I'm going to do now is something you should not... Okay, I'm going to get him a little lower here. Okay. What I'm about to do not do. This is not how you do the fight. This is not how you do the fight. I repeat, this is not how you do the fight. Do not do this. Not. Oh, I lived it. Alright. Success. Okay. That is not how you do the fight. Remember, her knock means log out. If you hear her knock, log out. I'm really, really, really recommending you, if you hear him yell her knock, log out. But yeah, this is why all is the good money, is because his amulet drop rate's like 60%. People think that the all amulet's rare. It's not. You're more likely to get an amulet drop than a non-amulet drop. It is not that rare. And this is purity of elements. On right now, this is probably only like a 4 divine amulet. But on league launch, this is a 20 divine amulet. If this was the second or third weekend of the league, this would sell for between 15 and 20 divines. Because free purity of elements is very powerful. Like, that's an amulet that just gives like 50 all res and ailment immunity. That's kind of a big deal. On top of also having decent stats. It's, you know, all attributes, int, 20% ES, 69 life. Like, yeah. Alright. That brings us next to the third and final boss, which is Ahuatolti. It's the Vaal city boss. So I have one of these saved at 45-41. If you saw earlier in the video me sell that map for 17 divines, that is a drop off Ahuatolti. It's a 15% drop rate, and I've sold a lot this week for about 20 divines. But they're not worth that much on league launch. They're only worth that much at the end of the league when people are like, oh crap, I have to finish 40 challenges, and, you know, now I need to buy this map that people have, like, jacked up the price on. So early league, it's worthless. Late league, it's worth something. Alright. We have Ahuatolti here. This guy is probably the easiest boss, but what he does is he just does some light fizz damage, and then he does this big circle ability. And, what's it called? Quikwoke? Whatever? No, that's his phasing sound, whatever. He does this big circle that goes underneath your feet, and it does this big explosion damage that's all physical. The reason this is deadly to some builds, but not my build, is because it leaves behind on the ground fizz degen. Armor stackers and Eye of Winter characters, if they stand in this fizz degen, they will evaporate like they just got Thanos snapped. Like, it is the most deadly thing in the entire game to them because it's fizz degen. Because their entire build is based off of converting fizz to Ellie from hits, having 90 res, and then taking armor and applying to that res another 10 times damage reduction. So they have a 99% damage reduction to hits and a 0% damage reduction to fizz damage over time. The elemental damage over time, like Mana Siphoner, they still have max res. But they don't have any need for, like, it's not a hit. Armor doesn't work. They have no flat fizz reduction. They literally take 100 times damage from fizz degen versus every other damage in the game. Because even the Eye of Winter Progenesis builds, degens bypass Progenesis, so the damage does not stagger. And it's fizz once again, so it does not get affected by 90% max res. So both max res, transcendence, and stagger do not work on fizz degen. So if the top 2 delve builds stand in this fizz degen, you will be dead before your brain registers that you're standing in the fizz degen. You'll literally see the release spirit, the resurrect in town page on your screen, and then like a quarter second later you'll realize, oh, I'm standing in the fizz degen. Oh wait, why is the resurrect in town button there? You'll die that fast. The other things he does is he does escargot, which is a giant snail he throws at you. That's why it's called escargot. He just makes this giant ball above his head. It's a giant snail. And he throws the escargot at you. It locks onto a position where you're currently at. And then it goes in that direction. And then just does this big fizz explosion over there. So you pretty much just want to bait it to one side. and then go stand on the other side. The other thing he has is in the four corners of the room here, there's going to be these rotating beams. These aren't really that deadly, but they're meant for if you're interacting with the mechanics more. Like, if you're baiting out the big nuke abilities, you're meant to, like, dodge the beams. But they're pretty... They don't hit super hard, and they're pretty easy to just blink over. But they just sit there and rotate. Not a big deal. The most deadly thing in the entire fight, though, is the projectiles. I'll have to pause damage for this, but randomly, at about the 10 or 20 second mark in a fight, he'll do this volley of projectiles that they all target where you're currently standing, and they shoot out from the edges of the room, and they all shotgun you on top of where you're standing. So you have to keep moving to get to dodge them. The challenging part with this is they scale with AoE and projectiles. So if the boss has 2 additional projectiles, each one of those volleys shoots 3 that have a spread to them. And it's an AoE. So if he does AoE and LMP, it does 3 giant radius projectiles each volley. And there's like 4 or 8 that shoot out. So where you're standing will have like 24 projectiles land on top of that area. That shotgun in a huge radius, and you will just die. So it's not the hardest thing to dodge if you're just moving in a circle. But if he gets either AoE or LMP, it becomes much harder to dodge. If he gets both, it's pretty much impossible to dodge. I've had Ahuatls that I had to kill before I had like a lot of movement speed. I was playing like non-Mage Blood Mjolnir, and I literally couldn't cyclone fast enough to get out of them. Like the speed I would cyclone at, and the speed that the projectile shot at, and the radius they had, I could not, even if I just moved in a straight line, they would all hit me. So every time he did the projectile attack, it would kill me. There's a minimum movement speed requirement to not die to that. You either need to do enough damage to kill him before he does that ability, or you need to have enough movement speed to be able to get out of it. But that's the really deadly ability. He has one more ability in the final phase where he just does this big rippling Fizz Nova. It doesn't really hit any harder than his other 2 big Fizz attacks, but I think you can move to the edge of the room and dodge it, because it only goes to like these urns here for radius. So if you move it to the very outside edge of the room, you can dodge it, but I usually just tank it. It's not like a one-shot. If that's one-shotting you, your character's probably not tanky enough to be at deep delve anyways, so oh yeah, I have to do no damage here. Okay. Oh, I think I have to get him to like 80. I'll get him okay. Salam Moti is the big... So this does Fizz Degen, right? Ready? See? This is the snail attack. This is escargot. I baited it over there, and then I ran over there. He just spams the Fizz circle the whole fight. Now he's going to do the projectile soon. Okay, he's doing another escargot. I'm going to bait over here and run over here. Another Fizz circle. You can see the beams. The projectiles are coming. He still hasn't done projectiles yet. Maybe he does those at like 70. Do I have to get him lower? Maybe I do. I'll get him a little lower here. There you go. So I just ran around there. I took that escargot. There's the projectiles again. See them? I don't have LMP though, so they're just single projectiles without any boosted AoE. There's escargot. Alright. It's weird doing these mechanics instead of just killing him. There's the projectiles again. Alright, Quiquote. Now every boss has this phase in the middle where you just kill ads. It's whatever. I think you've pretty much seen every attack with the big Nova and P2. And like I said, you can dodge to the edge of the room on the big Nova, but the truth is, if you can't tank the big Fizz Nova, you're not going to be at whatever depth you're at. Like, it's not the hardest hitting ability. Your build should be able to tank it, period. Let me just do a fast kill, because I don't think there's any point showing the Fizz Nova. I'll just try to flex some damage here. No. Okay. There's a maze. So this right now is 17 divines. So On League launch, this is 17 divines and this is 1 divine. Right now, this is like 4 divines and this is 17 divines. So they kind of flip-flop. But, alright. Those are the 3 bosses of Delve and the mechanics behind them. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to beat the hardest nodes in Delve. Because remember, when you start... Oh, that's the wrong thing. I want to click the cart. When you start off and you're at like depth 1000, because of how the HP cap works, bosses at about 1000 are the hardest thing you can do. But as you progress deeper and deeper, it no longer is the boss that's the hardest thing. It becomes the rares that are harder. Because of that, there are a couple nodes that get harder and harder and harder. And by like 3000, they're significantly harder than bosses. I'm going to go over some of those nodes, okay? The first I'm going to go over is a smuggler's stash. This is one of the most common nodes in all of Delve. It's not the hardest, but it's one of the most common. So, there should be a smuggler's stash here. 86? Right here. Nope. Nope. There it is. Okay. So, smuggler stashes, they're not the hardest node in Delve, but they're very, very, very common, and they can be hard. What it does is it spawns 6 exiles, and this didn't used to be a hard node, but about 4 or 5 leagues ago, maybe 3 or 4 leagues ago, they reworked rogue exiles, and they increased their health by 5 times, and they increased a lot of their damage, because rogue exiles were considered like this past league mechanic that had been like power crept out. So they buffed exiles. The side effect of this is the smuggler's stash node in Delve went from being one of the easiest nodes to one of the hardest. Because it got the same exact buff, and it still has all the depth scaling. So smuggler's stash is now one of the hardest nodes. I could go and microanalyze all 6 of the exiles and what they do, but here's the gist of it. They pretty much all do physical attacks. And so if you have evasion or like fizz defense, that'll help. But then Aura Greengate is the worst monster in all of Delve. She is the most annoying. She is the keyboard smasher. She is so frustrating to fight against because all she does is run away from you. She also curses you with vulnerability, which makes all the other exiles do way more damage to you if you're not curse immune, and bleed you. So you get bleeds on you, you get hit harder. If you're struggling with this node and you don't have curse immunity, bring a curse immunity flask and it'll make a night and day difference. But when you're deep enough that basically Aura runs away from you because she's like a ranged character that will just keep running farther away. Anytime you get close to her, she'll run farther away. So she'll just keep running farther into the darkness. And when she's in the darkness, she's immune to damage because darkness makes monsters immune to damage, which is incredibly frustrating. And she also does this rain of arrows attack, which pins you to the ground and you can't move. If you're like some bone shatter jug that doesn't move anyways, that's fine because you don't care. But if you're a character like mine that does move a lot and kind of relies on moving a lot, and like Mjolnir on Cyclone really hates this, getting pinned to the ground for 4 seconds can be lethal. So TLDR, kill Aura Greengate. That's it. You're going to go in, you're going to look for the exile that has a bow, and you are going to kill Aura Greengate, period. If you do that, you cannot lose. The other thing is, remember how I said dynamite does damage? Well, you'll want that damage here. The other thing is dynamite stuns. So basically what I like to do is I like to go in, just bomb dive Aura, get all the others except for the summoner who stays at range to just clump on top of Aura, and then I just drop 7 dynamite, and then they just stay perma-stunned while I blow them up. And then usually it's just the summoner who's out at range that I just have to kill one-on-one, and then it's fine. So you rely on the dynamite for both the damage and the stun, and you just kill Aura. If you do nothing else on this node, kill Aura Greengate. She has the bow, kill her. I will say it 10 more times. You have to kill Aura Greengate, the one with the bow. She is an asshole. She is the most supreme asshole in all of Delve. I'm looking for a bow. Where's the bow? I don't see the bow. There she is. Fuck Aura Greengate. She's going to try to run away from me. I'm pinned. I'm just going to kill them all. And I got him. So now the only one that should be left is the summoner that I'll just kill over here. And I win. That's how it should usually go. Obviously, it's going to be different depending on your damage. Those are all HP capped at this depth. But if you just look for the bow character, you can like dip in and try to get the melee ones out, and the one that stays behind will either be Aura or the summoner. Then the second you see there's a character that's staying behind that has a bow, you just start spamming dynamite and just kill them all. You'll kill those 5, and then you'll just have a one-on-one fight with the stupid summoner that you cannot possibly lose. The other reason the dynamite's nice is when she's stunned, she can't run away. So normally, if I go to her right here, where she spawned from, she would just immediately beeline in the darkness here, and just, like, when she's in the darkness, she's immune to damage, which is incredibly frustrating. So she'll just run, and she'll just keep running farther into the darkness. So by going on top and just stunning her 7 times in a row, the stun lasts for about 1 second, so I just spam it 7 times in a row. That lets me actually kill her without her running away. Lower DPS characters are going to struggle on that a little more with her running away. But if you're going to fight a smuggler stash, kill Aura Green Gate. Period. Alright, the next thing I'm going to show here is one of the 2 Abyss nodes. This one is called an Unspeakable Shrine. To be clear, of all the fights I've shown so far at like depth 5,000 plus, based off the modifiers on this zone and the node itself, this is the first one I probably have a real chance of dying. So I might die on this one. I've been pretty comfortable up until this, but this one's got some crazy mods. And this is the 2nd or 3rd hardest node in all of Delve. Once again, this is because it's a node that summons a bunch of rare monsters that was kind of balanced before archnemesis. Now that there's archnemesis, it's insanely hard just because of all the rares. But this is a node that it becomes a lot easier with a lot of damage. One last thing I'm going to talk about here, though, is there's 2 Abyss nodes. Unspeakable Shrine here, and there's another Abyss node that has like Haunted Remains or something. I forget what it's called. But the other Abyss node that's not Unspeakable Shrine is impossible to beat. It's bugged. You cannot beat it. It is not possible. It will spawn monsters forever. I've tested it for over 30 minutes. It is not a beatable node. So if you get to a spot that has the other Abyss node that's not an Unspeakable Shrine, it's a dead end. If you get to a spot where you're bottlenecked, where the only way down is through that node, you're screwed. It's a dead end. This has been bugged for 4 years. I've reported it multiple times. They have no interest in fixing it, but the other Abyss node is not beatable at all. You cannot beat it. If you see it, it's a dead end. Unspeakable Shrine, however, is beatable, but it's one of the harder nodes in Delve. It spawns a lot of rare monsters, and this node in particular is at depth 5.1k, and it has like 10 crazy modifiers with like pen, so this is going to be a hard one. This is a node, though, that does get a lot easier with a lot of damage, because it's not necessarily time-gated like some of the other nodes, like Harbinger. It's not bad, really. It's, if you can just blow stuff up instantly, it's not bad, because you start off the fight, and there's, like, these 6 crystals you have to kill. And after you kill those 6 crystals, then there's a bit of a so here's these crystals first, you'll see. I have to kill these 6, but if you have a lot of damage, it's easy. There's one right here. There's one right here. You just have to kill these, and then you start phase 2. Phase 2 is these 3 spheres in the middle that become attackable one at a time, and you just have to kill the middle sphere thing. They'll spawn rare monsters and stuff, but ultimately you just have to kill the thing in the middle. So right now that I've killed the other ones, this thing's up now. So this thing's attackable, I kill it. It's just going to shoot projectiles out at me and summon rare monsters, but once it's dead, it's just going to... Oh, I see. I told you I might lose this one. So that one's dead now. Now one of the other 2 are going to spawn. So this one's spawning now. And now it's dead because I have a lot of damage, and I decided to not... I was trying to, on the other one, show the mechanics, and on that one, I decided to not screw around and just kill it. This one, I'll do the same. I'll just not screw around and kill it. Oh, I lost my cloak. Never mind. Oh, I'm going to die to that scorpion, aren't I? Yep. Well, I got it. Okay. So, that is one of the harder nodes in Delve. But that one in particular is very, very deep depth. That was 5109. And it was a 10 mod pen zone. So, that was a particularly nasty node. Alright. Another node I'm going to show you here that's a little trick. Breach nodes. So, I'm going to die to this node. Not because I can't beat it, because I want to show you guys a little trick. Breach nodes are not failable if you start the breach. Some people don't know this, but sometimes you'll get to a really nasty breach node and it will kill you. But you actually can't lose if you don't release. So I could just kill everything and this one would be pretty easy. I'd win no problem. But I'm gonna die here. I'm gonna... Oh, did I kill everything? Shit. Okay, let me die. Something kill me. Come on. Well, fuck. Okay, never mind. Okay, I accidentally killed usually it keeps spawning in more monsters and I can die there. Okay. Okay. What happens there, I'll explain. I guess I can't show it now, but if you die and release, you have to start over. But the completion of this node is based on, it's the only thing it's based on is does the breach close? That's it. When the breach closes, you win. So if you die to a breach node, if you don't release and just stay there, once the breach closes, the node completes and you can move on. So you actually can't lose to breach nodes if you don't release. Alright. There are, I think, 3 to show left. Hang on. I've shown breach. I gotta show time lost, humid, and the king. Alright. So, humid fissures at 5198. Alright. Humid fissure. This is one of the, quote, money nodes, because humid fissure gives you faceted fossils. Fractured fossils. And fractured fossils, some leagues are worth, like, as much as a divine, for depending on what the league mechanic is, because... Yeah, in the past, fractured fossils were the big money in Delve because they were worth like over 2 divines, or 2 exalts back then, but back when exalts were divines, you know. And because people were doing like, there was no limit on how many times you could split something. So they'd make like this crazy 100% delirium map with like fractured beyond, and it'd just be the most juice map ever that would have like a 5 divine average return. And they just get fractured fossils to keep duplicating those maps, but now you can only duplicate it once, so they're nerfed. But, the humid fissure is a pretty easy node. All that's going to happen is it's going to summon these monsters that shoot these, like, projectiles at you for, like, 15 seconds. And after 15 seconds, this boss is going to spawn and become attackable. The node completes when that boss dies. So, really, all you have to do is just stall for, like, 10 or 15 seconds and then kill that boss. The only thing to have note of, though, is when you're standing in front, it does this attack which petrifies you. If you get to 5 stacks, see that beam that was on me? If you get to 5 stacks of that, it petrifies you, which can kill you. I tried to stand still and I almost got killed by doing it. Okay, I'm trying to show the petrify, which will probably kill me. But the node completes when you kill the thing. But there you go. But it does this little beam that targets you. And it builds stacks of a debuff that when you get to 5, petrifies you, like the Basilisk boss in the maps. Probably don't get petrified. That's a good way to die. All you have to do is move out to the side. If you move, like when it was over here, and it had the pillar here and the pillar here, all you have to do is just line of sight with the pillar. So if you stand directly in front for like 5 seconds, you'll get petrified and that can kill you. Just dodge top or bottom, whatever, just to move out of the way of the beam so you don't get to 5 stacks. Let the stacks reset, and then go back to killing it. Alright. Time for... There are 2 nodes left. The other money node I'm going to show Oh, no, I'll throw time loss. 3 nodes left. So of the 4 money nodes, that was fractured fossil. Okay. That means there are 3 left. Glyphic, hollow, and faceted. So let's show... I'm not going to show Crystal Spire, because there's really nothing to show. It's the easiest node. You just kill the Spire. That's it. It spawns abyss monsters. There's no mechanic there. You just kill the Spire. There's nothing I could possibly teach you from that. But Crystal Spire in the gray zones gives you hollowed fossils. That brings us to Genix. Genix is the boss of the molten cavity. So, some people do not know this, but the hardest hitting monster in Path of Exile is Genix. If someone says a different answer, they are wrong. Genix is by an astronomical amount the hardest hitting monster in the game. He's based off of Izaro's pet, Argus, and he hits very, very, very hard. I'm going to see if I have one that I skipped a while back. I didn't mark this on the sheet beforehand. Okay, here's one. Alright. A depth 6k Genix, while enraged with like 8 damage mods, I've done the math on this. His auto attack can hit for 20 memory games. You heard that correctly, 20 memory games. You saw that clip earlier where I lived a Brain Nova and it only took me down to 20k. Brain Nova does double the damage of memory game. The Brain Nova is 2 memory games. Okay? The nastiest Argus ever can overkill me by 5 times. His attacks can literally hit for 20 to 30 memory games. Of all the things you can face tank, even some of the face tankiest characters I've ever seen in Delve, even they have to worry about Genix if he's got like 3 damage mods. Even the absolute tankiest characters. I'm going to show you this just to die, probably. I could just blow him up and kill him here. I could press my damage button and kill him, but I'm gonna just show you the damage this guy does. I'm going to die here. Just to be clear, this is going to be a death. I'm going to do it with a full cloak. Alright, do your worst, buddy. Hit me with... Okay. Yeah. That's Genix. Okay. Pretty much the way that node goes is you just kill Genix and then you get the the fasted fossil, and those are worth half a divine. It's good money. Do not get hit. Do not get hit. If there's any monster in the game that you're going to purposely not get hit by, it's Genix. Alright. So, up next we have the time loss node. This is not going to be an easy one. So, time loss node is the essence node, and it's the biggest money one in this league. These are 2/3 of a divine. So, this is the biggest money in Delve right now. So, this is also one of the hardest nodes because these are going to be HP capped rares that have like 4 archnemesis modifiers and 4 essence modifiers. These are all going to be significantly harder than a boss. Pretty much there's 2 ways to do this. If you think you're tanky, you're going to group up all 4 in the middle, and you're going to drop 7 dynamite and try to kill them. Remember how I said that dynamite does 2.75% to bosses? The good news is that it hits rares harder. Unique monsters only take 2.75%, but rare monsters take 5.5%. So 7 dynamite's going to do like 40% damage to these guys. That's really good. So, especially if you're lacking damage but have an overabundance of tankiness, the way you probably want to do this fight is group up all 4 in the middle and then just drop dynamite. Well, if you're not very tanky but you have a lot of damage, the other way you do it is if you go to one side or the other, you can just group up 2 of them and kill 2 of them. So the glass way to do it is to go just to this side and kill 2, and then go to the top and kill 2. And then like the big dick way is to group up all 4 and then drop 7 dynamite. So If you're going to do the kill 2 strategy, I recommend identifying which is the tankiest. So this one has blocks attacks, and this one has consecrated ground. So these two are the tankiest. This one has suppresses recovery and extra life. So these two are not tanky. If I was going to kill 2 fast, I would kill these 2. And then I would go to the bottom ones and use my dynamite. But I'm just gonna group up all these. They have some tank mods, so this is gonna be tanky. But I very well might fail this. This is not an easy node. I have a high chance of failure here. But I'm gonna try to just do the group 4, and I'm probably gonna die here. There's also chaos damage in here too. That's really bad. Okay, well we didn't get the initial blow up down. That's not great. And there's chaos damage. Alright, well, so the whole kill 4 strategy I had with dynamite, the chaos damage came from essence, which pretty much took, like, yeah. Okay, that didn't quite go the way I was going to plan it because I didn't get the instant blow up because I had to bail because there was the chaos rain on top of me. Normally, if I'm going, like, full in, I can tank all that. But I had like 2 of the chaos firestorms directly on top of me, so I had to bail because that was going to kill me. But normally you'd do it like that, you'd group them up and just drop 7 dynamite and just blow them up. But dynamite is incredibly powerful on time loss nodes. That's like the single best use for dynamite in the game is time loss nodes. Those 4 rares. Alright. Time for the second to last node. Well, okay. I was going to show a Harbinger node because they're probably the second hardest node in Delve. But there's really nothing to show there. It's a timed encounter where you just fight 7 Harbingers for 3 minutes. There's really nothing I can show you there or teach you there. But I'm going to show a Beyond node. This is the hardest thing in all of Path of Exile. I got a depth 5,115 Beyond node. This is just for fun. This is the hardest thing in Path of Exile. Oh, I've already beat this one. Never mind. Whoops. Okay, hang on. Change of plans. 5066. I got a different one. Alright. Depth 5k Beyond node. There's not many things in the game harder than this. I mean, there aren't any, actually. It's not there's not many. There are none. This is it. This is the hardest thing. No thing in Heart of Exile is this difficult. You could make an encounter that had all 7 Uber Pinnacle bosses in the same arena, that you had to fight all 7 at once like Uber feared, and it would not even be as hard as like a 1k Beyond node. Because all of these rares that spawn, they're Scourge rares, which have like 3 times the base damage on all their abilities of most rares. And they have, all of them have HP cap at this depth, so they're all 2 billion health. And they all have archnemesis modifiers, and since there's like 10 of them up at a time, they're all stacking. So things like Executioner and stuff all stack together, and like suppress recovery, allies are immune, like all of those stack together. And there's not much you can do about it. Really, if you have to fight this for a long period of time, it's just gonna kill you. And let me try to get... Okay, this temp bubble kind of screwed me, but... If you were seeing the HP bar on the gore there, that was like about a 1-second kill. But I was inside a temp bubble, which reduces my damage by 40%, and it reduces my ramp by 40%, so I'm doing like a third damage there. But that was still a sub 1-second kill. Builds with lower damage, though, are going to really struggle on those nodes. It's the hardest thing in the game, especially if your damage is like the normal deep delve builds that only have like 200 mil DPS. Like, if you can't kill the boss in 1 second there for the full 2 billion, you're going to have a hell of a fight on your hands. But, alright. That's it. I'm sure I forgot something. I'll try to timestamp all of this. But I think Delve's a fun mechanic, just from the standpoint that in an ARPG, you want to fight hard content. Like, some people get their challenge by hindering themselves. They do solo self-found, they do hardcore, they do ruthless, they do gauntlet. They do something that makes their character weaker in order to make the content harder. The only other direction you can really go to give your character a challenge if you play this game a lot is deep delve, because that's the only thing in the game that is difficult if you have a really strong character that you've not like purposefully hindered. So if you are just like the OG ARPG player mentality and you want to fight, you want to climb the highest mountain, you want to fight the hardest monster, the only option there is deep delve. So from a fun standpoint, that's probably why most people deep delve, but there is a little bit of money there too. But hopefully this extremely long video that I did in one take is eye-opening, and maybe gets a few people to enjoy Delve next league. I'll see you guys in 323.